Welcome to another broadcast from mindyourhealthcast.com. As you probably recall, if you have viewed the last broadcast, we initiated a short series, maybe 2 broadcasts and possibly 3, but I'm looking at the producer. We always start out and say, well, this will probably be 2, and then it sometimes is 3, and occasionally has gone to 4. Well, we have picked probably one of the most important subjects that you want to consider. We are discussing something that has to do with the health not only of people in the United States, but the world, and it has a lot to do with the cost of ill health as a result of the lack of knowledge of some of the information that I'm giving you, that I gave you last time and will be reiterating again, and the advent of a couple of industries, actually, I guess it could be divided into 2, and how they have impacted the health and the economy, not only of this country, but of the world. Now, we're talking about the 2 industries, the food growing and processing industry and the pharmaceutical industry. And it's because of those 2 that actually they both help each other. It's because of them that we have such a terrible health problem, and that it continues to grow. People are getting sicker. Now, you don't have to be real smart to know that almost everyone you see today has some kind of significant ailment and are taking some type or group of medications for those. And of course, they've been told, if you don't take these, you're going to die. And so people are scared to death that they need to take it. Now, this series of broadcasts, if they end up 3 or only 2, and when I look at what I have here, my suspicion is it could be 3, are probably, as I say, the most important pieces of information that you should consider. Now, with all the election issues going on and all the talk about Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security and all of that, the whole idea of health and the cost of sick care, now they keep calling it health care, but it's really sick care. You wouldn't have it to be caring if it were health. So it's sick care, and the cost of sick care has gone out of sight, is outlandish in terms of cost. And when you look around, would you say that year by year we're getting healthier? Doesn't appear that way, even in light of all the supplements and all of the natural health programs of the practitioners of more natural health. All of these have really not changed it very much, and it certainly hasn't reduced the bill because the bill keeps going up. And so we want you to listen carefully and consider what I'm saying, and I don't want you to take it on my word. We're going to give you resources, and of course with the internet today, there's no excuse for anyone being ill-informed about anything if they want to look into it. Now, I know when you do go to the internet, you're going to find differing views, and sometimes you have to do a lot of sorting. You will find somebody rant and raving about something, and then when you look into it, they have no real evidence for it, but it's their opinion, and they're carrying on about it. So you'd have to look at all of the information, and you have to weigh it, and you have to use your brain, and you need to use, as I've mentioned before, or read and understand this little book, not very big, about this big, about that thick, called How to Lie with Statistics. And of course, the purpose of the book is not to teach you to lie with statistics, but to teach you how to find the lies in statistics. And of course, the pharmaceutical industry is one of the worst for perverting statistics or misleading in the way they're presented, or in some cases, is blatantly lying. And we're going to be giving you some of that information. And if there's two big things that I want to point out, that the food problem is a terrible problem and a major cause of people going and running for drugs. Everybody likes to be comfortable, I understand that. But comfort isn't always going to be there, or at least temporarily, when your body encounters something that it doesn't like or that could be toxic. It's going to try to get rid of it. And the process of getting rid of it means you're going to initiate the immune system, and when you initiate the immune system, you're going to have symptoms. Now, it is usually self-limiting. Your body, once it's taken care of it, settles back down. But everybody is impatient. We live in an instant society, an instant everything. And so they don't want to be inconvenienced, and they don't want to wait. And so they're more anxious to find a wonder drug and take that wonder drug to suppress those symptoms. Now, I keep emphasizing over and over, and if you don't believe me, just go to any medical journal, New England Journal of Medicine, the Journal of the American Medical Association, JAMA, or go to Lancet, the worldwide most prestigious medical journal there is, and you look at the ads for the drugs, and you look at the studies of the drugs that are found there. And what you will find is a common phrase for the relief of the symptoms of. Now, does it say it's going to cure anything? Of course not. It's not designed to cure anything. In most cases, they don't even know why you have the problem and really aren't concerned, because as long as you're willing to pay for a drug at a many times extremely high price, if you're willing to pay for that drug and feel better for a little while, thinking that you have been cured because you're not feeling the symptoms, then you do not understand the pharmacology, and you don't understand the purpose of the drug, and you certainly don't understand why your body develops symptoms in the first place. Now, we've talked about all those before, but it seems that we get caught up in everyday life, and we would rather read about what's happening to the latest high-powered movie star or musical performer than we would to find out what's important for us to live healthy and to cut the health bill, as they keep calling it, the health care bill. And it's not. It's going up. When you pass $1 trillion, we're talking about a lot of money going out for a lot of drugs and treatments. And guess what? The health is getting worse, not better. So now we're going to go back and review just a little bit. If you heard the last and watched the last broadcast, you will recall that I started out by quoting two different people. One was Benjamin Rush, MD, one of the signers of the Declaration of Independence, and he made, and it's attributed to him, and everything I can find, he did it, and to me it's consistent with him. I know the medical people have tried to poo-poo because they don't like what it said. He said, unless we put medical freedom into the Constitution, the time will come when medicine will organize into an undercover dictatorship to restrict the art of healing into one class of men and deny equal privileges to others. The Constitution of the Republic should make a special privilege for medical freedom as well as religious freedom. Now, anybody who knows much about the history of medicine will know that that is exactly where we've gotten to. If you look at over the years, and I'm elaborating a little more because I didn't as much last time. If you look over the years, the medical establishment has been, well, it started out of, I should say, with a conflict between two major philosophies of medicine. One was the predominant one at one time, and they were out actually to get people well and at a reasonable price. The other one was not doing well, and they initiated a campaign that to discredit the other system. They developed a lot of money from the pharmaceutical and chemical industry, And they eventually were successful in subduing the other system and bringing up into the public's eye a system that was never aimed to cure anything. It always was aimed to manage symptoms to make you feel better at a cost, of course. And so they eventually took over, and once they did, they tried to manage, control, or eliminate everything. There were other systems out there. Most of them you've probably never heard of because they did such a good job of suppressing them. Naturopathic medicine, which rose around the world centuries ago, became a target. The American Medical Association actually developed a campaign. There's strong evidence, and in fact the chiropractic profession, which was another one that was targeted, they were able to bring a lawsuit against the medical profession and won in court that a conspiracy existed to systematically destroy the profession and get rid of it. Now, what happened was, it wasn't that they wanted to do all these different things, which I'm going to give you a few examples, but what happened was they wanted to control it, and they wanted to control who could do it. And that's exactly what Benjamin Rush was talking about, is that they would do that. And once they got control, and we're talking about the standard medicine, the allopathic medical profession, who opposed the homeopathic medical group, which were the two major schools of thought in terms of health and sickness. Now, there were fractions came along, and they opposed all of those. I mean, even the dentists who wanted to make it into a profession and make it a license and set up schools and teach dentistry. Medicine didn't like that. They didn't want another licensed profession. They were fearful it would take away from them, and so they opposed it for years. Most people don't know that. The dentist actually had to fight very hard to get licenses and to make a profession. And the podiatrists, which were originally called chiropodists, they likewise were harassed by medicine and stalled for a long time because medicine wanted to control it. Even though they didn't want to focus on feet like they didn't want to focus on teeth, they didn't want anybody else coming in and taking away from the profession money and power, basically. And then we have the psychologists who came along, and of course they opposed the psychologists. We don't need psychologists, we got psychiatrists. We'll take care of it. And of course, yeah, they fought it real heavy, but too many psychologists were educated and eventually were able to get licenses. And of course, once all this happens, they give you the appearance, why, of course, you know, we're no problem, we're not against psychologists. But in fact, they were. They opposed it for years. Many of the states had a terrible time getting a licensing act passed to license psychologists. And so technically then, if you were trying to do psychotherapy without any kind of protective license, the medical people could come in and arrest you for practicing psychiatry without a license and put you in jail and shut you down, especially if you were gaining a lot of notoriety. And to me, it always went back to power and control. So then we had the osteopaths came along. The original osteopath was Dr. Still, who was an MD, but he recognized that the structure of the body was a problem and could lead to health problems. And so he established a school of thought to teach doctors how to correct the structure. Again, they were opposed. It was evident that medicine didn't want to do any structural treatment because the direction was medication and drugs. And surgery eventually, although the original surgeons were opposed also because they were considered to be mechanics. Only physicians were the high-level doctors, and that's what someone wanted to be if they wanted high-level prestige. Then they could diagnose and prognosticate, and that was their job. And they wanted that elevation of their profession. So they fought the osteopaths for years. And it's only been in recent history that the final state gave a separate license for osteopaths. But for a long time, they were not recognized, and they fought their way up from a drugless family of practitioners until they finally decided we need to study drugs and surgery too, and they finally gained some status with the insurance and with the licensing. And also, as I mentioned, the chiropractors were opposed, and they were smart. They found somebody who undercover got into the headquarters of the American medical profession, an investigative journalist who the medical people believed was going to write a negative article about chiropractic. They gave him access to their files, and he was unable to uncover how they had meetings deciding that they were going to first contain chiropractic and then eventually eliminate it. And so now we have a conspiracy, and so then he made photocopies of a lot of documents. It ended up the chiropractors in Illinois sued the medical establishment and won in federal court. Not only did they win, but the medical profession was enjoined from actually talking down chiropractic, and they actually had to pay a lot of money, not to the chiropractors, but to notify every doctor in the country about it. And also, chiropractors were allowed in the hospital for the first time because they had been blocked. And also, some of the evidence that came out was that chiropractic was more effective in a lot of structural problems than orthopedic doctors were. So they did prevail. And that's on record that they won this course. Now, the other group of practitioners that were out there for centuries, the naturopaths, did not fare so well. And it's interesting that in the state of Florida, where I am, in about 1957, the naturopathic profession was sold out and was closed down so that no new licenses could be issued. And so that was on their list too. And the same investigative reporter found a lot of documentation that the naturopaths also were the target. And if you go back historically and look, almost all the states, if not all the states, had naturopathic doctors, and many of them had licenses. But state by state, the medical profession went around the country and either got the board disbanded and the license disbanded, or they actually got a law passed to make it a crime to do natural medicine. And those laws are still in the books in many states yet, that it actually is a felony, and you can go to prison for doing natural medicine. Now, some of the naturopaths did hang out and did keep fighting, and so now some of the states have gotten licenses again. However, instead of naturopathic medicine being what they were, treating with natural means, they realized that if they got into licensing for prescribing drugs, that they would be able to be more accepted. Now, unfortunately, that is one problem, and the second problem is that a lot of pharmacists, a lot of nurse practitioners, a lot of physician's assistants, and so forth, wanted to be doctors, but for whatever reason did not or could not get into medical school, but got into the naturopathic schools, and now they've kind of flooded the profession with people who believe in prescribing drugs for symptoms like regular medicine, and so they're becoming more accepted, but they're getting rid of the natural medicine again. So it just is an ongoing battle. It has not ended and probably won't for a long time. Homeopathy has come back some, but there's only 2 states, I think, that actually, or 3 states that have a license for homeopathy. Only 2 of them you can get a license, and you have to be an MD or a DO to get that license. One of the states has a license for those who have it, but no new ones are being issued or can be gotten. So it's interesting to watch the whole political thing in the background, and most people hear none of this because you don't see it in the paper. Once in a while you see that somebody was arrested for practicing medicine without a license. You'll see that in the paper, but otherwise you won't see it. Now, Rush, as I said, was very prophetic, in the statement he made. So that was one of the statements we read last time, and now I'm going to give you another statement that I read last time, and this comes out of the pharmaceutical industry. So when we look at it, we've got some forces going that are clashing with each other. There's battles in the background. Most people don't know about it. And for all practical purposes, everybody thinks, well, medicine is the writing of prescription for drugs and surgery, and that's it. And it took years even for people began to hear or recognize that there was such a thing as homeopathic medicine or naturopathic medicine or natural medicine. But an interesting thing did happen. All of a sudden, acupuncture, which had been considered basically occult and was considered to be ridiculous and unscientific and a relic of ancient history, acupuncture and Chinese medicine came to the foreground because when President Nixon went to China and took his physicians with him, they observed the use of acupuncture to the point they came back, started talking about it, and all of a sudden some enterprising entrepreneurs brought some Chinese over here and started doing acupuncture. There's a whole story there. We won't take the time to get into it. But at any rate, it ended up that they got a foothold, and bit by bit, it's growing faster than any other profession. Even to the chagrin of medicine, they opposed it likewise, like they did everything else. But it got passed. Florida was one of the early states, and it grew from acupuncture, which really is one modality of Chinese medicine, into now Oriental medicine, which is the whole practice of medicine. And it is a school of medicine, and it is in the natural realm because it does involve diet and natural massage and manipulation and meditation and herbs and so forth. And it's growing tremendously. I haven't heard the final figure because it keeps happening, but I would say a high percentage of all the states now have a practice act for Oriental medicine. But still periodically there are battles fought because in the background medicine still periodically will try to somehow either reduce the practice of it or de-license it in different states. The Florida one has been attacked more than once, and several of the other states. And some states still, you can do acupuncture, but only if you have a prescription from a medical doctor requesting it, you can do it, and only for the purpose that it was prescribed for. And so there are several states that have a license that's on that basis. Florida does not happen to be one. In Florida, Oriental medical doctors are a primary care physician and can do all kinds of things, which has at least been challenged several times by the medical establishment trying to get rid of it, or at least curtail it. So, we get into the other quotation that I gave you last time, and this one, of course, comes from the pharmaceutical industry, which is hand in hand with allopathy, the medical profession. They work together, and in my mind, I see the medical profession as the front people for the pharmaceuticals. There was a time when it was very strenuous to become a medical doctor. There was a tremendous amount of things you had to do, and when you went into a little town and opened an office, you were everything. There were no blood labs around. There was no imaging laboratories around. The doctor, if he did x-ray, which was basically the primary thing that they did imaging-wise, he had to have his own x-ray unit. He had to know how to take them and how to read them. He did his own bone setting. He did his own diagnosis. There weren't blood labs all over the place you could send people to. And I laugh about it when I say that because most doctors don't know what to do with the blood test anyhow. If they don't look at the little range on there and above and below, they look at it and it doesn't mean anything. And they're not trained highly to read it. Even the hematologist, I've had discussion with hematologists before, they don't know too much what to do with it unless there's one like way out of range. Now, if you have acute hepatitis, you already know that because the symptoms tell you that. But you can run a blood test and find that the liver enzymes are extremely elevated and say, wow, look at that. But you already knew the person was sick, and when you looked at their symptoms, you already knew what they had. If you have somebody whose eyes and their skin turn bright yellow, there's vomiting and have severe diarrhea, and their urine is dark brown, you don't need really a laboratory test to know they've got acute hepatitis. You may not know which one it is, but it wouldn't make any difference because medicine can't do anything with it anyhow except put you in bed and give palliative treatment of symptoms, which is what they do anyhow. But otherwise, it really didn't take any Einstein to know that. But here we have the quote from the Pharmaceuticals. If I sound like I'm hitting on it hard, I am, like I was the last time a bit. Today I'm hitting it harder because this is one of the most important things that you need to really look into and consider. And as I say, I'm going to give you some sources. I mentioned some last time. We're going to give you a lot more before the whole thing is over, and it might take 3 times before we actually finish all this. But I was quoting last time the 2 quotes, one by Benjamin Rush about the physicians. Now this one is about the pharmaceuticals, which the 2 of them are like that anyhow. And it's called Selling Sickness by Ray Monahan, and we'll have these books. In fact, most of them probably are already on the book list, but we'll have those on our book list when you go to our website, mindyourhealthcast.com, and there'll be a page. There's pages of recommended books now, I think, because we've recommended a lot. Now, this quote that I'm going to give you, it's subtitled, the book is, How the World's Biggest Pharmaceutical Companies Are Turning Us All into Patients. Okay, so that's the gist of the book. Now, here's the actual quote that I gave, and this occurred back about 1975, about 30 years ago from the time this book was published, which is 2005. 30 years ago, the head of one of the world's best-known drug companies made some very candid comments. Close to retirement at the time, Merck's aggressive chief executive, Henry Gadsden, told Fortune magazine of his distress that the company's potential markets had been limited to sick people. Of course, to me, that's kind of an oxymoron. Who would you be making drugs for if it wasn't sick people? I mean, it seems self-evident, but he's upset about it. Now, why is he upset about it? I didn't go into elaboration last time, but I am going to this time because I want it to sink into your head. You know, you hear these statements and they kind of go over your head and you go right back to business as usual, and it makes no difference in your life. I want this to make a difference in your life because it really is a matter of life and death. The things that we're going to be talking about and have talked about is a matter of life and death. And it's a matter of finance. If you don't understand it, you can be financially destroyed because of sickness if you don't know why you get sick and what it takes to get you well, and you don't know that all the drugs that people are taking are making them sicker and are not intended to get them well. They're going to be having you come back as a lifelong patient. I guess you call that practice building if you get something that makes you think you feel better because the symptoms have been suppressed, but you're actually sicker. You're going to be back again more seriously ill, require more expensive drugs, and somewhere down the road, probably surgery, radiation, and all of that, because you did not know and understand what I'm telling you right now. I don't think I can emphasize it enough. I mean, it hit me one day what was going on in the world, and I haven't been the same since then. I haven't been as verbal as I've started to get, but it was one of the reasons I wanted to do these broadcasts, is I wanted to make an emphatic plea to people to start paying attention because of look what's at stake. I mean, we have all these people running around scared to death that they can't get access to drugs, and the very thing they're wanting access to is ruining their health. There's going to be 3 things I'll be talking about that are detrimental to your health. Now, Dr. Mendelsohn, even many years ago, warned about it, and his books were popular for a while, but then, of course, as is always the case, they fall into the background, we forget about it, people come along, and they're back to business as usual. except the business is so outlandish that nobody can afford the bill. Okay, so here's Mr. Henry Gadsden, who says he's distressed because they can only sell to sick people. Now, I feel bad for him, don't you? It's kind of funny, but here's what he said. He suggested he'd rather Merck be more like chewing gum maker Wrigley's. He said it had long been his dream to make drugs for healthy people. Now, are you hearing this? Here is a major executive from one of the largest pharmaceuticals in the world, and what is he saying? We want to sell drugs to healthy people. Does that impact you like it did me? Here's a guy who wants to do that. He wants to go out and convince healthy people they should be taking his drugs. Now, it says, because then Merck would be able to sell to everyone. We're going to double our market, or if that many healthy people out there to double it. We're going to double our market. 3 decades on, the late Henry Gadsden's dream has come true. Can you believe that the American public sat by and allowed some company who manufactures a product then the product supposedly is for sick people? Can you imagine that they were successful in convincing non-sick people to buy the drug too? I mean, does it impact you at all to hear that? To me, I mean, it's unbelievable that we could be sucked into buying drugs when we don't need them, and at a high price. The marketing strategies, I'm going on from the book, this is not a quote from him, the marketing strategies of the world's biggest drug companies now aggressively target healthy and well people. The ups and downs of daily life have become mental disorders. Well, you know, if your dog died and you're depressed about it, do you now have a mental disorder called depression that now requires a drug like Prozac? I mean, think about it. That's what the ads tell you. They show a scene, and the marketing is outlandish. They show a scene of all this family sitting around with a long, sad face. Because after all, this disease, depression, not only affects you, it affects everyone around you. So everybody's suffering because you're not doing something about your depression. So what are you going to do? There's a joke about that. What are you going to do? So now, common complaints are transformed into frightening conditions. Oh, it's terrible to be depressed because your dog died. We need to give you some pill that you won't have to be depressed. Now, since that's come up, I'm just going to throw this in because it's so outlandish. I talked about it before, but you may have missed a broadcast, or you may not have been paying any attention, but the company who put out the major drug for depression for quite some time, Prozac, the magic, that drug was manufactured by a pharmaceutical company who previously were manufacturers of LSD. Now, most people don't even give that a thought, or don't know it, or maybe just don't care. I mean, if you don't care, that's fine. That's your choice. That's the one nice thing about living in a country that gives you a choice. You don't have to believe anything. If you don't want to, you can accept anything that you want to. So if you don't want to believe it, that's fine. But anyhow, it's out there. If you go back and track it, you will find that the same company was making LSD, hoping to market it in this country and around the world. However, it ended up that LSD was so toxic to the brain that only a few micrograms put you on a trip out into outer space by way overstimulating the serotonin receptor sites in the brain, and that people would stand on top of a building and believe, wow, I can fly, and dive off. Or they would jump out windows or do other kinds of crazy things because the brain was so off into outer space. Now, that same company could not get LSD on the market, so guess what they did? Their chemists came up with a different tack, and they developed another drug that still involved the serotonin receptor sites and the neurotransmitter serotonin. But what it did, it caused the body not to break down serotonin when it was released in the synaptic cleft between two neurons and stimulated, picked up and was stimulated the serotonin receptor sites, which raises your mood. So hence it was called a mood brightener. Okay, so Prozac was that drug, the same drug that was released by the pharmaceutical, the same pharmaceutical that had the LSD now put out Prozac and tried to convince everybody, if you're a little depressed, you need Prozac. In fact, one doctor wrote a book called Listening to Prozac, and in his mind, almost everybody ought to be on Prozac. And of course, everybody ought to have their mood brightened because, you know, there's stresses in the world and things aren't always the way you want them to be, and sometimes there's ups and downs, so don't worry about it. Just take Prozac. Just listen to it. Go get some of it and everything will be fine. Of course, everything won't be fine, but you won't care. So I found out several years ago when finally chronic fatigue syndrome became more accepted, because many years there was no such thing. All these people were laying around because they had a psychological problem and were depressed. It wasn't because they had some issue physically. So it had to be just psychologically, and so the thing to do was give them some Prozac. Well, anyhow, I heard along the way, well, medicine's finally researching a drug that should be helpful for chronic fatigue. So I did some digging to figure out what it is they're coming up with, because I had worked with a lot of people who had those symptoms and got well, and I knew that they could get well, and so I was wondering what they were coming up with. Well, as I observed all of this and did some digging, they were using the generic name for it, but the bottom line, it was Prozac. So I guess the philosophy was, we can't help your problem, but we can give you such a mental state that you really don't care anymore. So if you have to lay around, so what? It's okay. Everything's great. Now, so that's what they did. They turned a little depression into a serious illness. And so when you saw the ads, you see all these people who are sitting around with a long face because this person is depressed. Everybody's smiling, and they're outside, and they're in the countryside, and there's green, a lot of bright green and flowers, and everybody's happy just because they took Prozac. And as I said, this one doctor wrote a book listening to Prozac. Now another more intelligent doctor, who was a psychiatrist, I thought I had his book lying right here before. Yeah, no, I have it someplace around here. I've got so many books and papers that it's kind of hard to keep track of all of them. But his name was Dr. Peter Breggin, a graduate of Harvard, psychiatrist, taught at Harvard and been in the psychiatric field working for years and years. Had originally written a book called Toxic Psychiatry. And of course, I was trained in psychiatry years ago at Cleveland Psychiatric Institute. Went through a program for 2 years, learned an awful lot about psychiatry. It was under the auspices of Case Western University School of Medicine Department of Psychiatry. And the Cleveland Psychiatric Institute, it was, and I assume still is, a teaching hospital, psychiatric hospital. And so anyhow, drugs were starting to come out when I was there, but nothing to the degree that they are now. And so I watched this whole scene change. And so Breggin still believed that you had to help the people solve their problems. In other words, he believed in some type of psychotherapy. And he was opposed to using toxic chemicals in the brain to try to get you to not think about your problem, and not do anything about it, but just, okay, everything's okay, don't worry about it. And of course, so he looked into it, and so he wrote a book called Talking Back to Prozac. And what he was saying, you know, don't do it. And then he has another book out, which I thought I had here actually, that I was going to show you. And this book, he said, your problem may be the drugs you're taking. And he even went into it further. So all of that because of a little depression. And there's more I could say about it, but I'm not even going to carry it on anymore. But he's saying in this book, more and more people were turned into patients with promotional campaigns that exploit our deepest fears of death and decay and disease. $500 billion pharmaceutical industry is literally changing what it means to be human. Rightly rewarded for saving life and reducing suffering, the global drug giants are no longer content selling medicines only to the ill, because, as Wall Street knows well, there's a lot of money to be made telling healthy people they're sick. That's where it's gotten to. And in fact, it has worked so well, and we're going to talk a little bit more about the ads, and I mentioned the one ad related to antidepressants. With less than 5% of the world population, the U.S. already makes up almost 50% of the global marketing and prescription drugs. They have done their job well, and Mr. Gadsden's dream of selling to healthy people is working very well. Now, I'm not going to go any further on that at this point, but this book you should get and read, Selling Sickness. Very important. This writer realized what was happening, and he's trying to get people aware of it. But you know what? I haven't heard this book really getting a lot of press. I guess you haven't either. It was written in 2005. It wasn't getting a lot of press then, and it hasn't now. You know, occasionally I'm sure somebody mentions it. But anyhow, they hired these very high-powered advertising agencies to search through all kinds of things, find a symptom of something, and try to blow that up into an illness that could be prescribed to. And they've done it very successfully. I mean, look at the TV ads today. The bulk of the ads are either pharmaceuticals trying to convince you that you need their drug, or go talk to your doctor about it. And of course, I dare say that very few doctors, when a person comes in and says, I think I need the purple pill, are they going to say, nope, not giving it to you. They're going to sit down and say, wow, this is easy. Write them a prescription and they're out the door. So now they're pre-diagnosing on TV, and the people, all they do is go in and request their drug of choice. And it's working well. They're selling billions of dollars worth of drugs based on a system like that, and that's why 50% of the world drugs are going in the U.S., because we have such good marketing campaigns. But I would say you definitely should read this book, among some others I'm going to be giving you, and see how you have been deceived into thinking, because you've got a little pain or a little bit of a depressive drag or something for a little bit, that you now have the symptoms of a serious illness and you need to be taking this powerful drug. And incidentally, I see I had right in front of me Dr. Peter Bregan's book, Your Drug May Be Your Problem. How and why to stop taking psychiatric medications. Now, his specialty is in those, and there's a lot more we could say about it, and we probably will at another broadcast, some of the implications of taking all these psychiatric drugs. The fact is that Bregan was involved with some lawsuits, not against him, but as an expert witness, and they subpoenaed records from the drug companies, and in those they found out that the drug companies already knew of the problems and dangers of Prozac, but they had kind of withheld some of that information from the FDA to get their approval, and now this is coming true. And that is that taking too much Prozac, or for too long, it's different for different people because we all have different tolerances, can so upset the brain serotonin system that people can go into a terrible depression, and either kill themselves or kill someone else. There's been a lot of looking into, related to Prozac, some of these shootings where groups of people are shot by some person who seemingly is suddenly going crazy, and I'm convinced that Prozac and other drugs of that nature are part of the problem, if not the whole problem. I mean, it's not to say that maybe the kid didn't have some issues, but we are so prone to take a pill for every symptom that without even knowing. I mean, how many people go to the PDR and read all the implications of a drug that they've been prescribed? Or how many even question the doctor? There are some, and I'm not saying there's not some out there, but it's not happening. Now, there's a pile of books, and I suppose I should go ahead and mention them at this point, then we'll put it aside. Now, this one I read from, the quote from the Pharmaceutical Merck, and we're going to be talking a little bit more about Merck before we're done. There's a book out called Seeking Sickness, Medical Screening and the Misguided Hunt for Disease. Now, all these books are addressing why we have an outlandish medical bill in terms of what's being done in modern medicine. However, and it's very impressive. I mean, you can turn on the TV and you see here there's this latest imaging unit. I mean, it's monstrous, takes up this mammoth room, costs millions of dollars. Okay, you got a brain tumor. Now what are we going to do with it? Of course, medicine can't do a whole lot. Probably the person will expire before it's over, but not before they show you this other big mammoth piece of equipment that's going to beam this radiation into your head and try to burn that tumor out of there and try not to kill you in the process. And then they're going to show you these chemistry labs that they can do all this sophisticated testing. A few more millions of dollars, and of course a few more billion to the health bill, or sickness bill. I got to get out of that. They keep calling it a health bill because they don't want you to think of this sick idea, but it's a sick bill. And so all of these millions and millions of dollars of very extensive, very impressive looking equipment, and when it's all done, what do we have? More sick people with chronic illnesses than ever. I'm going to keep coming back to that. Is it hitting you? Are we better? Are we healthier? Just think about it. I'm thinking about this with all the political ads. Are we better off? Are we more well? Have we been able to reduce the health bill? No, we're worried about having more money available to pay more for all of this. And I admit it's impressive. I mean, I like technology as well as anyone else. But when you take somebody in and you run $100,000 worth of diagnostic tests, in most cases they never find out what the real cause is. Well, we're researching it. Give us a few more $1 billion and someday we're going to have our handle on this. We're going to know why you have it, and then we're going to someday have a cure. But in the meantime, just keep those billions rolling in because we're keeping researching, and someday we'll do it. I don't know when the day is because the whole approach is, in my mind, way off and has not proven to do it at all today. So anyhow, Seeking Sickness, all the diagnostic tests. That's going to be on the list. Overtreated. Why too much medicine is making us sicker and poorer. As if we didn't know. We are sicker and we're poorer. Those are two obvious facts when you look around. You don't have to be very bright to see that. How many places you see people in the electric scooters and dragging an oxygen tank behind them? Many of those people could have been taken care of a long time ago. They've now been made invalids. Who's paying the bill for all that? We are, of course. Here's another one. Overdiagnosed. Making people sick in the pursuit of health. Kind of interesting. That's going to be on the list too. And here, this is a really good one. Otis Webb Brawley, MD. How We Do Harm. A doctor breaks ranks about being sick in America. Here's an MD. Was actually involved with the National Cancer Institute, I believe is the organization he's been involved with. But he still is involved with treating people, or he has. And he has an inside handle on what's going on. And so he talks about how we do harm. Above all, you'll remember if you've heard the Hippocratic Oath, I'm not sure they take it today. Maybe they do, but the Hippocratic Oath, remember, ends up by saying, above all, do no harm. And that's what this book is all about. Politics and healing. Remember the politics because it goes back to what Benjamin Rush said. The suppression and manipulation of modern American medicine. There's others out there. Racketeering in medicine. I mean, I've got a pile of them. These are many of them, and most of them, written by either scientifically trained investigators or MDs or professors of medicine or whatever. Dr. Mendelsohn was a professor of medicine out of Chicago. He also had taught medicine. I mentioned before, and if you haven't gotten it, I would get the book Confessions of a Medical Heretic. I think he eventually lost his life because he was exposing a lot that was going on within medicine, and he debated other doctors on TV, and he testified in behalf of other methods of treatment other than the traditional methods. But that was one of his big books, Confessions of a Medical Heretic. It's still available for through us to Amazon or direct Amazon. If you want to bypass this, I don't care. You should read the book. How to Raise a Healthy Child in Spite of Your Doctor was one of his books. Medical malpractice, how medicine exploits women and some of their problems. Very good stuff. And he, as I say, he was not well liked by a lot of the other doctors because he told the truth. He was one of those doctors like this other one, how we do harm. He's willing to risk his life and his career on exposing what's happening today. I have a book by a professor of medicine from New Orleans, the university. I think it's Tulane is the university he is, and maybe he's still with, I don't know. Anyhow, he wrote a book because he was harassed, because he was suggesting that maybe we should consider the good nutrition as being part of what we should be telling our patients. And so he was harassed like crazy. He tried to lose his position as a professor of medicine and so forth. I've talked to him personally. I met him before. I have his book. And even in Canada, there's a doctor up there that was harassed. She wrote some books too. I mean, they're all out there. All you have to do is go look for medical dissidents, racketeering in medicine, drug dangers. I mean, there's all kind of search engine words you can use, and it's out there. So, at any rate, that's just a few of them. But it goes worse than that, and we haven't gotten to that yet, and we're not going to be able to get to that today. I can see that. And I always get a smile out of my producer when I say that. What I want to do, we're getting right down toward the end, I guess, of this broadcast, but I'm wanting to be emphatic because I want it to sink in that we have not just a major problem, we have an outlandishly terrible problem. We can't pay the bill anymore. There is not enough money. If it continues as it's going, there will not be enough money, period, to pay the sick bill of not only the world, but even our country. There's just not going to be enough money. And all of the investors in the big pharmaceuticals and in the medical industry are raking in huge piles of money. I have an acquaintance who was a high-level marketing executive for one of the largest pharmaceuticals in the world, and every month he was harassed by his superiors that our investors expect an increase in income every month, and if you can't provide it, we will find somebody that will. The drug reps are harassed. We can talk a little bit about this if we get to it the next time, because we're going to go heavier into the whole pharmaceutical thing. We've just kind of touched on it to this point. So there's two things that we really are going to need to emphasize. One is where the pharmaceutical industry has gone and what has happened to their ethics morality, and so forth. I mean, again, the evidence is out there. There's no doubt it's out there. You may think that no. They're in business to help people. They wouldn't do that. Wait till you hear some of this stuff. It's written about in books. There's lawsuits over it. And it's going on. And when you understand more why you get sick, which is the second thing we're going to want to emphasize, I'm going to throw this at you right now, most of the illnesses that you're being given pills for are deficiency symptoms. They're not even a disease as we think of a disease. They are deficiency symptoms. And we're going to tell you why, and we're going to tell you what the real approach is to produce healthy people. And the bill would get down to nothing compared to what we have right now. Well, how much do you hear people talk about prevention? And if they are talking about prevention, what do they mean? Well, come and do this test early. And so we'd see if we can find some cancer so we can get you in a cancer treatment regimen. And therefore, we can have you treated longer before you die. And we're going to find that that's true. I mean, if you look at the numbers, you're going to find that's exactly what the case is, that people aren't living longer. They're not living longer with cancer. They're just being treated longer because they're detected earlier, but they still die. And we're going to get into that in more detail. But the other point is that if we were eating good food that had in it good nutrients, we wouldn't be having all these deficiency diseases, and therefore there would be nothing to prescribe to. I remember a time when that was true. I hate to say it, I've been on the earth for a lot of years, and I've watched a lot of things change. I've watched the pharmaceutical industry come into power and become big business. I've watched the medical industry come into power and produce big business. I've watched the food processors and their counterparts, the food growers, on a mass production. I'm talking about commercial food growing and food processing. I've watched them come into power. I've watched supposedly the industry, or I should say the agency that should oversee all of that and should never have allowed all this stuff to happen, become part of the problem. And I'm talking about the FDA, which originally the act was called the Pure Food and Drug Act. How the reason it came into being was adulteration of food and adulteration of drugs, selling people phony stuff, unsafe things, dangerous things, and selling them food that was worthless, that actually was going to be making them sick. That's why the whole FDA, what's now the FDA, was established. The original man who was responsible for it, Dr. Harvey W. Wiley, MD, who was also had a PhD in food chemistry and food science way back. He was the mover to get it all going because he saw what was happening. Another one of those guys, like Rush, who could see what was happening in the medical industry, this guy could see what was happening with drugs, and he could see what was happening with food, and he wanted an agency that could stop it. Now, when we talk to this a little bit about this more, I hope it makes sense, because within this knowledge is the solution to the problem. The solution is that if we correct the soil, and we grow healthy food, we don't have deficiency symptoms, what are the doctors going to be prescribing to? Because pretty much every symptom that's out there, we're going to talk about some of the symptoms of deficiencies. And if you've got that, now a few of them you've heard about, you know, and they make out like it's an anachronism or it's no longer valid, was the vitamin C. You remember, if you've remembered any of your history, now I know that they're cutting out a lot of history today, so you may not get it, but historically, Great Britain had the largest fleet of ships in the world, military and otherwise. pretty much at one time. And they noticed that their sailors, after they were out to sea for a while, developed something called scurvy, and could lead to very serious problems. And so after investigation, it was found that if they got vitamin C, they didn't get scurvy. And so the sailors, then the ships started carrying limes with them, which had higher vitamin C, and they ate those instead of just the salt meat and the hard biscuits that they carried with them. And guess what? The scurvy disappeared. So the sailors from Great Britain who were carrying the limes with them took on the nickname limeys. Now that's one of the first instances of a deficiency disease, if you want to call it a disease, and in the true sense it is not at ease, so therefore it's a disease. And so there's a huge list of deficiency symptoms, and we have them all. And if those were corrected, then we wouldn't need all of this expensive, heavy diagnostic stuff, all this expensive drugs, and this outlandish sick pill. We wouldn't need it. But a lot of things would have to change. We'd have to do some major readjusting, because everybody is making a good living off of the sickness. And people don't even realize how many people are making all the big money off the sickness, between the researchers and the manufacturers of the equipment, the manufacturers of the drugs, and the blood labs who do all these tests. I mean, everybody's making a good living off of it at the expense of human health. I don't know if this is making sense to you or not, but I'm hoping I can impress on you. And then next time we're going to talk about some of the lies and the scams that have been put out to convince you that you need to take more of these drugs. And how clever they are in the way they do the ads. I mentioned the one already, and we're going to talk about a few of the worst drugs and some of the worst scenarios, and some of the unscrupulousness that has taken place to sell you those drugs and to get them on the market. And we're going to be talking about some of the vaccine stuff again, because there's some terrible stuff out there about that. And we're going to get into it. And it's not just with humans. I don't know if you've noticed or not, but we have a terrible amount of sick animals. Everybody's animals running to a vet. You know, when I was young, not one animal that I ever knew of got sick with any degenerative disease. You know, they might get injured. They might fight with another dog and get injured. They might be attacked. You know, I had a cousin that his dog was attacked by a bear who was wounded. There might be some things like that. But the doctors of veterinary medicine didn't have offices in most cases, because nobody ever took their dog or cat to a doctor of veterinary medicine. They weren't sick. I don't know if you know about that or not. Maybe some of you have grown up always going to a doctor of veterinary medicine. They worked out of their car, and mostly they did work with farms. If something unusual, an injury or something happened with animals, and so they went directly to the farms. They didn't bother having an office. They'd sit there all day and have nothing to do. Now, veterinary medicine is a thriving business, because now the animals have all the same illnesses that humans have, and so they have to go and have all these expensive drugs and procedures and vaccinations and all these things. And are they healthier? No. Just like humans, they're sicker. How many people have a dog that at least one or more times they've taken it to a vet to be treated? I had 3 dogs growing up, and probably a couple of dozen cats, and never once did any of them ever have to be taken to a doctor of veterinary medicine. And they were healthy. They ran, they jumped, they went out, could take them out in the woods, and they had fun running and jumping. They ate what they wanted to eat. They got real meat. They didn't get some phony grains and make it look like meat and call these scientific diets and all that baloney. They're not well. The animals aren't well either. I mean, are we blind that we can't see that everybody and every animal in this country about is sick? Doesn't it impress you? And that now we're having to spend over $1 trillion a year to pay the bill for all this? when it wouldn't have to be? And look at the food. We're paying a fortune for food which is going anymore. And that's another issue, but it's all tied in together. So anyhow, we've expended our time, it appears to me, as usual. But we'll try to wrap it up next time. This time I really want it to be emphatic how important this whole issue is. Now, this is not a passing thing. This is an important thing. And I've watched it all happen. I was born in 1937, and I have watched all of this stuff occur over the years. And way back along the way, it started to hit me what was happening. I became a practitioner of natural medicine, but it's a hard sell, because then people have to become responsible for what they eat and how they live. Now, it doesn't seem to bother them as long as they've got insurance that they can run to the doctor for all these symptoms that crop up because of their lifestyle, but it's so much easier, you know. I got a terrible headache, I go to the doctor and get a pill for my headache, and I got a sore throat, I go get a pill. But why do you have sore throats? There's a reason. And the reason is the body's trying to heal itself. And why is it trying to heal itself? Because it's contaminated, and our bodies are contaminated. So if we can bring this all together so that it makes sense to you, then you're going to get the big picture. And if you get the big picture, maybe you'll be moved to do something about it. I don't know. I guess a lot of people won't. They'll be happy to get a fast fix for every symptom that occurs and just keep on trucking. They won't be so happy the day they go in and out of the blue the doctor says, gee, I hate to tell you, but you're full of cancer. And then you get on the cancer merry-go-round, and $1 million later you die of complications of cancer. Actually, rarely do you die of the cancer, you die because of the treatment, usually. And or your body starves to death because the cancer is taking all your nutrients, and therefore you die of starvation. But at any rate, when that gets there, then of course it gets your attention a little bit, but then you get scared and you run for more of the same. You don't even consider there could be some other alternatives, and most people don't. Even people in the natural health field have missed the mark, so to speak, with all of this, because a lot of them think the same way. I've had so many of them say, well, boy, I wouldn't want to do the surgery, and I wouldn't want to do the radiation, I want to do the chemotherapy if I ever got cancer. And then when they talk to people, oh, no, I wouldn't go do all that stuff. Guess what? More often, when they go in and they are told you have cancer, guess what? Well, what do I need to do, doctor? Well, yeah, oh, I need radiation? Sure, yeah, I'll do it. I need surgery? Yeah, sure, I'll take that surgery. Yes, yes, what else do I need to do? And they jump right on the same merry-go-round, and $1 million later, guess what? They don't survive. I've watched a lot of them come and go over the years. I've watched a lot of even colleagues in the natural health field come and go. And I'm planning on being around a whole lot longer to see the turnaround when people finally realize, wow, why didn't I see that before? There is a solution. And it's not spending $2 trillion or $5 trillion. The solution is changing the way we live. And it's a whole lot cheaper and a whole lot more permanent. And it's going to produce healthy people. I guess it's time to sign off. I got that slice your throat and shut up. So, next time we'll try to wrap this up. I got a lot of stuff in today in between that I wanted to kind of get in because it's it's simple in a sense, but it's very complex to present it because there's several things that you need to understand at the same time, and that's what makes it difficult because it was all happening concurrently. It's not like a bunch of isolated things. It's like a whole spectrum of things that all came together to get us where we are today. And as I say, if you go back and look, the information's there, but how many people do? They don't, because they are too busy. Got to watch the ball game, and we got to do this, and we got to do that, and we're too busy to worry about our health. So, as I'm saying, this is probably one of the most important broadcasts that I've done that you need to grasp, because it involves the whole realm of wellness and sickness. And once it hits you, once you see it, I'm hoping it's going to get enough people start making change that we get out of this whole or get off the merry-go-round. That's what we're on. And you know, the funny thing about a merry-go-round is you ride around and around, and they used to have the brass ring, and if you get the brass ring, guess what? You get to ride around some more and more and more. And that's kind of the way it's been. So it's time for me to get off of here, and we'll look forward to you again. Go to our website, mindsyourhealthcast.com. We are continually adding, changing, and so forth. And from there, you can click over to our other website, Alternative Health and Prevention. And if you have questions, you can post your questions, or you can do whatever you want. We look forward to hearing from you, and be sure to tell your friends, neighbors, and even your enemies that the broadcast is up and that we are bringing timely information. Until next time, be healthy.